The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a 2017 game that was originally developed for the Wii U, but ended up being a launch title for the Nintendo Switch alongside other absolute bangers like 1-2 Switch and Just Dance 2017. It's not my favorite Zelda game because A Link Between Worlds exists, but it's definitely near the top. Breath of the Wild, if you don't know, is a tragic game. Possibly the most tragic game I've ever played, with the exception of maybe Three Houses, which might end up getting a video later. I don't know, it's pretty complicated. It takes place 100 years after the Kingdom of Hyrule fell and all of their champions either died or were presumed dead in the case of Zelda. Is she a champion? I don't know. I'll say yes. You could play the game for hundreds of hours and never defeat Calamity Ganon, but the game's main story has a sense of urgency to it. You want to complete the game. Moreover, you want to save Zelda and you want to save Hyrule. Through the 18 memories that you collect, the game forces you to watch Link and Zelda's relationship grow beyond a princess and her knight. You watch as Zelda struggles to awaken her power until the moment she sees someone that she truly cares for in immediate danger. She then has to face the calamity alone as she waits for her hero to awaken and seal Ganon away for another 10,000 years. Throughout Breath of the Wild, the four champions of Hyrule are established almost entirely through memories. Every single memory in the game totals less than 32 minutes, and yet we get fairly good characterization for each champion. The champions aren't insanely complicated characters, but they each have traits that make you feel connected to them in some way. Mipha as a childhood friend to Link, Daruk as a friend to him later on in his life, Urbosa as a maternal figure for Zelda, and Rivali as a competitive rival and someone who disapproves of Link and his very existence. Each of them have their own memories that characterize them, as well as the shared memories, which show them off even more and how they are alongside the other champions. Throughout these memories, we see the bonds and traits they all share with each other. All of them take pride in their being a champion, and they serve as a guidance for Link and Zelda, who they know the whole fight will come down to. The game uses these memories to show who they are, and to make what happens next sting even more than it already does. Watching these memories hurts, because through context clues throughout the story, you can tell what happens next. You know what is being planned and prepared didn't work. From the moment you start the game, you see the remnants of Hyrule, and when talking to NPCs, you hear bits and pieces of what happened before Link went to the Forever Box. While in the memories, each one of the champions has their own moments to shine that really sells you on a character, you hear from each civilization how they view their champion and how they deify them in their sacrifice. Obviously, the character we focus on most in these memories is Zelda, and you see her grow as her relationship with Link does. With Wind Waker's Spirit Tracks probably being the only real competitors, I would say this is the most of a personality Zelda has ever had. She has ambition and wants to help her people beyond just her role in the fight against Ganon. She dedicates herself to researching the Guardians and the Sheikah Slate, both of which are against her father's wishes, and throughout all of this, she insists that she doesn't need to be escorted around by a knight. Now, all of this doesn't need to be escorted around comes to a head in the memory entitled Blades of the Yiga, where Link saves Zelda from the Yiga clan. Here, we see Zelda warm up to Link, and for the first time not question him, his proficiency, or even his own free will. In the next memory, we see Zelda stitching up Link's wounds and lightly chastising him about how being brave doesn't equal immortality. This literary device is known as foreshadowing. This also marks the second time that one of the characters mentions the growing restlessness of nature in one of these memories, whether it's Death Mountain erupting or the frequency and scale of monster attacks being higher. The memory after shows Zelda's care for nature, especially the Silent Princess, a flower which she says can, quote, only thrive out here in the wild. This literary device is known as a metaphor. The memory then ends with Zelda teasing Link with a frog, calling it a delicacy, showing even more of how they've grown closer. The next memory that includes Link and Zelda takes place in the rain, with Link training and Zelda wondering about the mysteries of the universe and their place in it, which really kind of sums up their personalities in this game. Here, Zelda wonders,
what if one day you realized that you just weren't meant to be a fighter? Yet the only thing people ever said was that you were born into a family of the royal guard, and so no matter what you thought, you had to become a knight. If that was the only thing you were ever told, I wonder then, would you have chosen a different path?
which, is a nice and light topic of conversation between friends. The memory ends with a shot of them both. This is the first time that we see Zelda really open up to Link. We've seen her warm up to him before, but not open up. Her asking about him choosing a different path is with no subtlety a mirror to her wanting to choose a different path. All that she has ever been told is that it's her duty to seal the calamity away, and that all of Hyrule is counting on her. At this point in the story, she's 16 years old. That's all she's ever been told. And yet, throughout these memories, we see her trying to forge her own path, and instead use the Guardians to try and hold off Ganon due to her own inability to activate her power, and her insecurity that she won't be able to activate it when she needs to. In the next memory, we see the king, her father, forbid her from having anything to do with the Guardians. Obviously, she isn't a fan of this, but the effects of this memory are only fully seen in the next memory, where she's praying at the Spring of Power, pleading with the goddess and wondering what is wrong with her. Through these two memories, we see and hear the extent of Zelda's training, prayer every day in an attempt to awaken the power that she needs to save Hyrule. She wonders why it isn't working and if it's her that's the problem. In the next memory, it's revealed that she plans to pray at the Spring of Wisdom on her 17th birthday, which is tomorrow, in hopes that it will awaken her power and she can stop worrying about it at last. The following memory is the last before Ganon awakes, and it begins with Zelda confessing to the champions that her power has still not awakened and she doesn't know what to do. The ground rumbles, purple lightning erupts from the sky, and Ganon awakes, because even though he can't beat a 17-year-old in combat, he can at least make an entrance. And then, we watch as everything goes wrong. We see Zelda break down and cite herself as the reason everything has failed in the next memory. We also learn of the fates of the champions, trapped inside the divine beasts, presumably dying to each of the blights. In the memory after, though, at the moment of truth, Zelda's power awakens, and she expels the calamity from the guardians around her. However, foreshadowing is paid off, and Link dies, like, full dead. Fi is kind of canonized, and then Zelda orders Link to be taken to the Shrine of Resurrection to pop out on the 3rd day, or the 100-yearth day. In the cutscene that plays when you pick up the Master Sword, you learn your memories were taken away by the shrine, and that Zelda is presumably going to the castle to face Ganon. We already knew the second one, but it's more of securing a timeline, you know? It's also revealed that Zelda has a special message for Link. Before she can say it, the Deku Tree tells her to tell him herself, and my friends to lovers brain rot completely pops off and, goes crazy. Here's the thing. By the time you get through all of these memories, you've presumably talked to a lot, if not all of the NPCs in the villages throughout the game. You've heard them talk about how their champions died 100 years ago, and throughout the game you're reminded of who these characters were and who they are exclusively and distinctively talked about in the past tense. They're dead and gone. Almost everyone that Link knew in his past life, the 4 people he worked closest with apart from Zelda, are dead but not buried because blights don't know how to use shovels. But these characters are killed off so nonchalantly. It just happens because it already did. There's no going back, there's no changing it. Link and Zelda failed to stop the calamity, and now all of Hyrule is suffering. I don't think for a majority of my playthrough I was really thinking about it. I was too busy searching for the next thing to explore, but the story really hit me on my second playthrough. As I played through the game the second time, I found myself really paying attention to the dialogue and the memories, and everything about the world the game took place in. I really became obsessed with the lore, and I found myself deeply saddened because of it. I thought about this game a lot, and I've played it even more. True story, I learned recently that I didn't actually 100% the game a second time. Like, I thought I did, and I've just been lying to people for the last 2-ish years. Whoops. But what I did complete was the story and the Champion's Ballad. The Champion's Ballad adds 14 minutes of cutscenes that tell the stories of when Zelda picked the champions, when the champions got their garb, and then one extra. And if you weren't attached to these characters before, you probably are now. Though they really all have one main character trait that can be comical at times, you get attached to them. The second to last cutscene, and the first one in the DLC to include Link, involves the champions receiving their champion's garb, where we see once again as King Rome puts the pressure on Zelda that we've been seeing. And with this cutscene, we're reminded again that you have failed to save everyone. And the last cutscene for the Champion's Ballad is just the champions hanging out together a bit. They talk about the Sheikah Slate before taking a picture together. The Champion's Ballad theme plays in the background as you reminisce during one last memory. The DLC gives us characterizations and reminds us of how close the champions grew in a short time as everything was up to them. And then we're brought back to our world, fallen and incomplete, and ready to be saved by the hero of Hyrule. I started writing this video in June of 2020, and so if it feels like two distinct styles of writing kind of arguing against each other, that's probably why. Breath of the Wild's story impacted me in a way that I can't really describe. It tells so much and yet keeps so much a mystery, and it's all so tragic. It doesn't take a genius to realize why I'm releasing this video now. It's because the sequel comes out in a little under a month, and it would be completely irrelevant then. But I've started to rewrite this script quite a few times, actually. It was actually scheduled initially to be one of the first videos on this channel when I rebranded and started back up again. But I could never really say what I quite wanted to with it. But now, like Zelda, when the time is, counting down, I've finally done it. This game makes me really sad. Okay, that's not all I have to say, but it's a start. This game makes me really sad. I played it when it first came out, and I played it again in March of 2020, and there's no secret as to what was going on then. I'm sure my state of mind at the time didn't help with the sadness of this game, but it reminds me of the limited time things are around. Like Unisonus after it, Breath of the Wild impacted me far beyond a piece of media probably should. But what is art if not for you to get something more out of it than the artist intended? To make you think about loss, and how Link and Zelda feel, losing almost everyone they knew, and letting down the kingdom Link swore to protect, and Zelda was born to protect. Though Link may not remember either. The last cutscene in Breath of the Wild, after you get all the memories, witnesses Link and Zelda reuniting, and her saying how she believed in him all this time, and how she knew he'd come back for her and save her. And the cutscene closed with her asking, "Do you really remember me?" The prestige of this game and the ultimate tragedy is us not knowing the answer. We can assume the answer is no because of how the shrine works, but maybe things are different because of the memories. Regardless, it's devastating. Then, we see them leaving the castle together, but the answer still isn't given to us. We just see petals of the Silent Princess fall around them as the king and the champion's souls are finally put to rest. Their legacy secure, their task complete, and their happiest day achieved. Wait a minute. And then, finally, we have the post-credit scene, where Zelda tells Link of all the things they must do, not the least of which being talking to Mipha's father. She talks about rebuilding Hyrule and all their plans together, and how despite having saved Hyrule, their task is nowhere near complete. The storytelling in Breath of the Wild isn't everyone's style, and I recognize that. It's telling a past story through memories and NPC dialogue, but to me, it is as impressive as it is heartbreaking. The story's already happened, and now you have to learn it. The story's left open-ended, not quite giving us all the answers and leaving the door open for a sequel, but it doesn't feel unsatisfying. It feels open-ended because just like the rest of the game, it is. Until May 12th, 2023, but whatever you think happens next, because it's your story as much as it is Link or Zelda's. Breath of the Wild allows you to do as much or as little in the world and with the characters as you want, and I can't imagine a more fitting way to tell the story than by having the player search it out in a vast, unfamiliar world, learning things at the same time as Link, going through the trials and tribulations as you learn about the princess you dedicate yourself to saving. You may not get an answer to if Link remembers Zelda until Tears of the Kingdom, or maybe ever. But let me tell you, if the answer is no by the end of Tears of the Kingdom, I will be fist fighting Enuma during the next Nintendo Direct. Thanks for watching.